let's talk about the big, bad, scary thing for most young actors. The scariest part, besides the performing, the scariest part of preparing a monologue or a scene or any sort of performance: memorizing. Now, the truth is, too often, young actors really wig themselves out over memorizing because it seems so much scarier than it is. You look at a monologue or a scene, you're like, oh my gosh, I have to memorize all that. But think about it. Before you answer that question, think about all the things that you already have memorized in your life. Favorite song lyrics, ways to beat particular levels on video games, stats about athletes or any other thing that you're interested in, song notes, dance choreography, directions around the city, where certain things are in your house. Your brain is actually hardwired to memorize. All of our brains are. So it's not nearly as scary as you think. That's step one. You've already memorized a lot of stuff. So have more confidence in yourself already. Step two. When it comes to memorizing, there are certain strategies that you can use depending on how your brain best memorizes to prepare. And that's what we're going to talk about right now. So, option number one, and this is the one that I personally, Mr. Tourtellotte, use. Depending on how your brain works, my brain does better with listening and with repeating. So I do a combination of different things. I will record myself saying my lines using an app that allows you to practice listening to and then repeating your lines. So, a free one that I personally recommend is an app right here. You'll see it, it's that little mouth called Script Rehearser. Script Rehearser is a free app that you can download and you can record your lines into and then play back through headphones or through your speaker or whatever so that you can listen and practice saying the lines along with the recording of yourself. Now, what I usually do, the first thing that I do when I get a new script that I need to memorize is I have my script and I record my lines. And then I'm usually doing memorization processes in two ways. Either I've got the time to sit down and I'm looking at my script and reading it while I'm listening and saying it out loud, all three at the same time. Read, say aloud, and listen all at the same time. Or option two, and again, I do both. Option two, I will listen to the lines over and over and over again, the same way that we listen to our favorite songs all the time. Listen to them over and over and over again until I can start to say it along with them when I don't even need the script. Okay? And you can do both at the same time. You could do one, then the other. There is no one way to do it. But I know that eventually, if I just get the practice in, I'm going to have the lines down. Okay? Option two. If you're a more visual person, if you know that your brain does better with, like, when you read something or you see something, it sticks more, then you might want to try one of these two strategies. You can choose to write out the monologue or the scene, lines, whatever it is, by hand on a piece of paper. That's still kinesthetic. It's still hand-eye coordination and writing things out, so that's super helpful. And it ingrains the lines into your memory in a different way. I personally don't do that, but just because I don't do it doesn't mean it wouldn't work for you. So try it. Even one time might help. But I know plenty of professional actors who will write out their lines 5 times over and over because that's how their brain memorizes. Okay? Option number 2. You can follow option number 3. You could follow the gross repetition, and by gross I mean like number of repetition strategy. This one's pretty time consuming, but I know plenty of actors who it works for. So you might want to try it and see if it works for you. It would go like this. I say a line, especially this works best for monologues, but it also works for scenes. If I have a line, and I know I've got another line after it, I'm going to say it sentence by sentence over and over and over again to really get the words in the muscles of my face. Muscle memory, right? It's the same way athletes run drills over and over and over and over again so that they experience it in their whole body. This is the same principle for actors. Only this one is pure muscle and a lot less like listening or writing. So I'm looking at my script. To be or not to be, that is the question. That's my first line. So I'm going to say it 5 times. To be or not to be, that is the question. To be or not to be, that is the question. To be or not to be, that is the question. To be or not to be, that is the question. Okay, now I'm going to add. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind. 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 Now I'm going to go back and add the two together. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind. Right? Time consuming, but effective. The big two things for you to remember, no matter what strategy of memorizing you attempt, there are two key factors. Number one, you cannot memorize what you do not understand. So if there are words in your monologue that you don't know what it means, your brain is not going to remember it. If there is something going on about the monologue that you don't fully understand, your brain is going to have a hard time remembering it. So if you have not done the script analysis and the text analysis and breaking down what's going on in your monologue or in your scene, it's not going to work. You're never going to be 100% memorized because your brain won't let it stick. I promise you. Second big thing for you to remember. Do not wait to try and memorize until the day or two before. It won't work. You have got to layer in a practice of memorizing. You can memorize, depending on the length, you can memorize a monologue or a scene pretty easily over the course of 4 or 5 days. If you practice 15 to 20 minutes per day for those 4 days. And 15 to 20 minutes isn't much. If it's dedicated, concentrated practice, whether you're listening, writing, repeating, or some combination of all of the above, you will be able to memorize in that period of time if you've done your analysis. Comma but. If you wait until the night before, your brain and your facial muscles, your body, you won't be able to retain it. That's just not how the brain works. You might get 60% of it if you wait until the night before. And even then, it's only 60% if you're lucky. Because you might sit there and you're like, yeah, but I can do it, Mr. Tourtellotte, I'm different. Yeah, okay, well, here's the problem. You might think you can, and you might actually get pretty good the night before, and then you're going to sleep, and then your brain's going to forget most of it. And then, even if you're frantically reviewing up until the last second, right before you get on stage, what happens when you get on stage, or when you hit record, or whatever it is? The adrenaline goes. And remember that adrenaline literally short circuits the part of your brain that is responsible for memory. So if you haven't drilled this into you, if you are not fully prepared to play this character with these lines fully memorized and owned as part of you, the actor, that adrenaline is going to mess you up. And every year, every performance, there's always one student who doesn't believe me. There's always that student who gets up on stage and they start and they get 1 or 2 or 3 lines in. And then you watch their eyes get super wide and they get that nervous, like I'm about to cry smile because it just goes right out of their head. And they'll say to me every time, Mr. Tourtellotte, I had this memorized, I swear. No, you didn't. You thought you did, but you didn't. Because that kind of thing only happens in a performance when you did not do the prep. Every year, every performance, there's at least 1 or 2 people who don't believe me. I promise you I'm not lying. I've been doing this for a long time. So, to recap, make sure you understand what's going on with your character and that you understand every word of every line of your monologue or scene. Number 2, make sure that you do not wait. Do not procrastinate. Practice your memorizing a little bit at a time over the course of several days, and by the time you get to your performance, you will be ready. Remember that when it comes to memorizing, there is no one way to do it. There's a variety of different strategies. There is listening, recording and listening to yourself and speaking it along with the recording. There is writing it out by hand over and over again, if that works for you. or there is just sheer muscle memory repetition over and over and over. 5 and 5 plus 5. And again. And then you go forward and forward and forward. Any one of these strategies will work. I don't care which one you choose. I care that you pick the one that works for you. Because when the performance day rolls around, you're the one that's going to be up there. Which means you need to pick the systems and put in the work that is going to result in the best performance. Good luck.